My name is Claire. I'm 36, a nurse living outside Cincinnati, and I'm resilient, maybe stubborn, definitely done being invisible. I'm a divorced mom of an 8-year-old, rebuilding a life that was supposed to be quieter, kinder, and safer than the one I left. I threw a birthday party for my son. Nobody came. A week later, Mom sent something that changed everything. If you like these confessions, please hit the like button and subscribe. It means this story gets shared. Has family ever left you standing alone? Tell me where you're watching from and what you would have done. My son's name is Jonah. He's 8, all elbows and questions, obsessed with dinosaurs and pancakes shaped like T-Rex. He still believes in superheroes and that people do the right thing. I wanted his birthday to stay small but magical. A backyard afternoon with pinwheels, paper plates, and the kind of laughter that doesn't sound staged. That's what I promised him. We moved into this house 2 years after the divorce. It's a modest ranch with a swing set in the yard and a mailbox that stubbornly leans to the left. I work nights at the hospital. Days I try to be present. Homework, scraped knees, dinosaur facts at breakfast. My life is routine, careful, school drop-offs, quick grocery runs, bedtime stories where I whisper, "You are brave." Family has always been a complicated thing for me. My mother, Evelyn, raised me in a house where appearances mattered more than apologies. She's a neat woman, always lipstick, small pearls, a smile that says nothing and judges everything. Dad's gone. He died when I was 25. After that, Mom tightened up, like someone closing the shutters against a storm. The rest of my family, 2 cousins, an aunt who lived 3 towns over, kept their distance. Traditions at my mother's house were more like performances. You showed up. You rehearsed gratitude. You left with your flaws tucked behind your teeth. When Jonah was born, I wanted everything to be different. I wanted visits that felt like catching up, not cross-examinations. For 2 years, I tried. I brought casseroles, texted on birthdays, sent pictures of Jonah's first steps. I invited them over. I sent details, time, address, directions. I even offered to pick up anyone who needed a ride. Small things. Real things. There were cracks from the start. Little things. Comments that slid like knives under the soft talk. "Are you sure you should let him eat so much sugar?" my aunt said once, smiling like a barbed compliment. "Oh, Claire, you're doing such a brave job," Mom would say, with that tilt of pity that calls itself concern. They called my parenting different. They called my divorce a phase I should outgrow. I let it roll off. I was determined to be the mother Jonah needed. I folded my pride into party napkins and set the table with our best paper plates. I baked cupcakes that looked like tiny suns. I hung cheap bunting that flapped in the mild wind. Jonah's face when he saw the spread was everything, open, honest, and immediate. He ran from the car, hair still messy from school, and threw his arms around me. "Mom, this is the best," he shouted. He ripped off the T-Rex sticker I'd put on his shirt and put it on my chest. "Best party ever," and then we waited. We timed the cake. We checked the driveway. I had texted, called, and followed up with the group chat, my mother included, 3 times that week. No one said they were coming except a neighbor who promised to pop in with her daughter. Jonah blew out the candles with the solemnity of someone making a wish he believes in with every cell. An hour passed. 2. The neighbor stopped by with her daughter for 10 minutes. She hugged Jonah, said the right things, and left. The backyard circled itself into silence. The small pile of party favors sat like little accusations on the picnic table. I watched Jonah's joy shrink just a little, like a tide receding from the shore. I remember the exact sting of my mother's voice when I called later that night. "Oh, Claire, I saw your pictures," she said, like a headline read aloud. It looked lovely. I tried to feel the warmth of the word, but found only chill. "You weren't there," I said. My voice was steady but sharp. "You said you'd come." There was a hesitation long enough to hear. "I had something come up," she said finally. "It was complicated." She offered the standard maternal excuses: the car, the dog, the headache that doubled as a small novel. I listened. Jonah heard her too. standing by the window with frosting on his lip, chin shining like moonlight. "Is she coming over later?" Jonah asked me, hopeful. His voice was small. He wanted his family. He wanted the village he'd been shown in pictures. I swallowed. "Maybe," I said, because it felt less like lying and more like buying time. That night, Jonah slept with the tea, Rex sticker under his pillow. I think he thought it would bring people closer, that the sticker would make the absent show up. I stared at the ceiling and rehearsed conversations in my head. Why didn't they come? Did I offend someone with a text I forgot? Did my divorce make me less? The questions rolled like a grinding wheel. For days afterward, the group chat filled with polite reactions, heart emojis, a single comment that said, "So cute." My mother sent a gift, a small box of store-bought cookies, and a checkbox of approval. That should have been fine, but something in the way she wrote "sorry we couldn't make it" felt rehearsed, like a line from a play where the actress barely remembered the emotions behind the words. I thought maybe I was overreacting. I told myself resilience is about rising without drama. I told myself I would let it go. For Jonah. For the quiet life I promised we'd have. I made pancakes the next morning and emphasized syrup as if nothing had happened. And then, 7 days after the party, something arrived in the mailbox that wasn't a card, or a gift, or another grocery store apology. It was an envelope heavy with a weight that wasn't paper. I slid my thumb under the flap and felt my pulse move into my fingertips. Inside was a single thing. I can't tell you what it was, not yet. Not because I'm keeping secrets, but because when I looked at it, the air in the kitchen changed, like a low hum before thunder. It wasn't just an explanation. It wasn't an apology either. It was a beginning. When I tell people I grew up in Ohio, they imagine cornfields, polite neighbors, and casseroles on Sunday nights. They're not wrong. But my family's brand of Midwest was polished like glass. Nothing out of place. No feelings on display unless they could be turned into currency. My mother, Evelyn, called it keeping up appearances. I called it suffocating. My father was softer. He had a laugh that filled a room and hands that smelled faintly of sawdust. He'd fix things around the house, sometimes twice if the first job wasn't good enough, and then wink at me like we shared a secret. When he died suddenly, heart attack, gone before anyone could say goodbye, the balance of the house shifted. Evelyn hardened. My aunts and cousins circled tighter around her like planets around a sun that burned too cold to touch. And me? I became the outsider. Maybe it started earlier. I wasn't the perfect daughter they wanted. I wasn't elegant or obedient. I liked jeans more than dresses, books more than debutante teas. When I fell in love at 22 with a man who worked construction and didn't own a suit, Mom nearly swallowed her tongue. She told me he'd never amount to anything, but I married him anyway. For a while, I thought she was wrong. We had Jonah. We had love. And then we didn't. The divorce was ugly. My ex-husband wasn't violent, just absent. He traded in responsibility for late nights, broken promises, and debt. By the time Jonah was 5, I had packed our lives into boxes and signed papers that left me with full custody and a mortgage that scared me awake at night. My mother didn't comfort me. She said, "I warned you," like my pain was her proof. Still, I tried to keep the ties. I wanted Jonah to know his grandmother, even if she never knew how to truly love without strings. Every Christmas, I drove 2 hours to her big house with its white columns and navy shutters. Jonah would sit on the edge of her perfect couch, fidgeting while my mother served tea in china cups no one was allowed to breathe too close to. She'd ask questions like they were arrows. Are you managing the bills? Does the hospital even pay enough for the hours you work? Have you thought about marrying again? A boy needs a father, Claire. I'd smile tightly, press Jonah's hand, and swallow the urge to scream. Birthdays were always the hardest. Growing up, my birthdays were spectacles. My cousins got ponies, bounce houses, and weekends at the lake. I got a cake big enough to feed 50, even if only 20 showed. It wasn't about me. It was about the display. When Jonah was born, I swore I'd give him something different. Love that wasn't conditional, parties that were about joy, not performance. So when nobody came to his 8th birthday, the sting was doubled. It wasn't just rejection. It was history repeating itself, only worse. My son sat there staring at the gate, waiting for cars that never turned down our street. And my family, my blood, didn't even have the decency to call and cancel. Jonah didn't cry. That almost broke me more. He just kept glancing at the cupcakes like maybe if he believed hard enough, someone would show up. Later, when he asked me in his small, tired voice, "Did they forget, Mom?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to say yes. But the truth was worse. They didn't forget. They chose. That week, I found myself replaying everything. Every holiday where I bent over backward to make things easier. Every meal I hosted. Every gift I sent. Every time I let my mother's voice turn me into a child again, small and guilty. The patterns were there, sharp as glass. I had ignored them because I wanted Jonah to have what I never did, a family who showed up. My neighbors noticed. 2. Mrs. Klein from across the street stopped me one morning while I was pulling weeds from the garden. She's in her 70s, wiry, the kind of woman who still bakes pies from scratch. She placed her hand on my arm and said, "Honey, I saw the decorations up last weekend. Looked beautiful. Did Jonah have fun?" I opened my mouth, but my throat closed. He had fun with me, I managed. Her eyes softened, but her jaw tightened. "You deserve better than that." "Both of you do." It shouldn't have meant much, just a neighbor being kind. But it felt like the first time in years someone wasn't pretending I was overreacting. Someone saw us, really saw us. I started noticing things then. A shift in how my mother messaged me, like she was keeping something back. Shorter replies. Questions that felt loaded. Once, she asked if I'd updated my will, like it was a casual thing you bring up between weather updates and grocery lists. My aunt posted a family photo online. Everyone gathered at my mother's house the same weekend as Jonah's birthday. No mention of me. No empty chairs at the table. Just smiles, neat and practiced. That was the gut punch. They hadn't just skipped the party. They'd chosen to gather somewhere else, together, without us. I kept that from Jonah. I told him people were busy, that sometimes adults make mistakes. He nodded, but I saw the doubt settle in his small shoulders. Children know more than we think. He knew. And then came the envelope. It sat on the counter for hours before I opened it. Thick paper, my mother's handwriting sharp as ever. I thought maybe it was a late birthday card for Jonah. Maybe even money tucked inside like a bribe for her absence. But when I slid the letter out, I realized it wasn't for Jonah at all. It was for me. The words inside weren't an apology. They weren't even polite. They were something else entirely. Something that made me put the letter down, grip the counter, and whisper to the empty kitchen. What the hell is this? Because whatever my mother had sent, it wasn't a gift. It was a warning. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for an entire day before I worked up the courage to read it again. I kept hoping I'd misread, that exhaustion from a night shift at the hospital had twisted the words into something they weren't. But when I unfolded the paper a second time, they were still there. Black ink pressed so firmly it left grooves in the page. Claire, you can't expect people to keep showing up when you keep making choices that shame this family. Maybe it's time you accept that Jonah will never have the kind of birthdays you're trying to force. Some of us can't pretend everything's normal anymore, no signature. But it didn't need one. The handwriting was my mother's, neat and severe. I sat down hard at the kitchen table. My hands trembled as I traced the last sentence. Shame this family? By throwing my son a birthday party? By refusing to play the polished daughter role she'd rehearsed for me since childhood? Jonah padded into the room in his pajamas, hair sticking up in all directions. What you reading, Mom? I shoved the letter under a stack of mail. Just bills, I said quickly. Too quickly. His eyes narrowed, suspicious the way only children can be. He didn't push, but I knew he felt the lie. That letter rattled in my brain all week. It colored everything. When I dropped Jonah at school, I imagined the other moms whispering, "She can't even get her family to show up." When I clocked in for my night shift, the fluorescent lights seemed harsher, the whispers in the nurse's station sharper. I told myself it was paranoia. But paranoia doesn't leave notes in your mailbox. By Wednesday, I couldn't take it anymore. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, voice clipped as if she'd been expecting me. "Claire, did you write it?" My voice shook, but I pressed on. "The letter. Did you put that in my mailbox?" Linz. Just the faint hum of her refrigerator on the other end. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." I gripped the phone tighter. "Don't lie to me, Mom. It's your handwriting. Who else would send something like that?" Her tone shifted, low and cold. "Maybe someone's trying to tell you what you refuse to hear." "About what?" "That I'm a bad mother? That Jonah doesn't deserve a family who shows up." She sighed, long and theatrical. "Oh, Claire. Always the victim. Always twisting everything into a wound you can parade around. That did it." My throat burned, but I kept my voice steady. "He's 8 years old. He asked me why nobody came. Do you know how that felt?" "Do you?" She didn't answer. She just said, "You should have known better," and hung up. I stood in my kitchen staring at the deadline, my hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. The days that followed were filled with smaller cuts. My aunt posted another family photo, this one of a cookout in my mother's backyard. Jonah's cousins were running through sprinklers, cheeks flushed from summer heat. No invite for us, not even a mention. When I confronted her over text, she replied with 3 words. "It wasn't planned," Jonah noticed. Kids always notice. He looked over my shoulder one evening as I scrolled. His little brow furrowed. "Why aren't we there?" I tried to smile. "Because sometimes Grandma forgets to invite us." His lips pressed tight. "She doesn't forget," he whispered. And I couldn't argue because he was right. That weekend, Jonah and I went grocery shopping. Simple errand, nothing remarkable. But as we walked past the bakery, he tugged on my sleeve. "Can we get a cake, Mom? Just us." "Like another birthday," I swallowed hard. "Of course, baby." We bought a small chocolate cake with rainbow sprinkles. That night, we lit 2 candles. He closed his eyes and whispered his wish so softly I almost missed it. "Maybe next year they'll come." I was nearly broke. By the following Monday, I was running on fumes, long shifts at the hospital, short tempers, Jonah's growing questions. Then the phone rang. Caller ID, my cousin, Lindsay. We hadn't spoken in months. "Hey, Claire," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "I just wanted to check in. How's Jonah?" Suspicion prickled. "He's fine, why?" "Oh, no reason." A pause. Then, "Look, don't take this the wrong way, but maybe you should stop inviting everyone to these events. It just makes things awkward." "Awkward?" My voice rose. "You mean birthdays? For an 8-year-old child?" She chuckled nervously. "It's just, you know how Grandma feels. About the divorce. About the choices you've made. People don't want to get caught in the middle." My chest tightened. "He's a kid. He didn't choose any of this. I know," she rushed. "I'm just saying, maybe if you backed off, things would be smoother." I was shaking, but my words came out icy. "Tell me, Lindsay, when did it become normal to punish a child for his mother's life?" Silence. Then a muffled, "I should go," and the line clicked dead. That night, after Jonah was asleep, I pulled the letter from under the pile of bills and stared at it again. The grooves of my mother's handwriting felt almost carved into the page. And for the first time, I wondered if it was more than just cruel words. Was it a warning? A threat? I didn't have answers. But I had a gnawing certainty. This wasn't just about birthdays. This was about something deeper. Something my family had been hiding, and they were starting to let it slip through the cracks. And then, one evening, I found something in Jonah's backpack that made my stomach drop. It was Thursday night when I unzipped Jonah's backpack to check his homework folder. Crumpled worksheets, a library book overdue, a sticky granola bar wrapper, and then, at the very bottom, an envelope. My pulse jumped. It looked almost identical to the one my mother had sent me. Same heavy paper, same sharp handwriting. This time, though, the name on the front was Jonah's, my son's name. My hands shook as I slid it out. Jonah was brushing his teeth down the hall, humming that off-key tune he always hummed when he was trying to hurry. I unfolded the letter and felt my chest collapse. "Jonah, Sometimes people don't come to your parties because your mom makes choices that embarrass everyone. You'll understand when you're older. For now, just know it's not your fault, but it's also not ours. Not his fault. But not theirs either. All the blame was placed squarely between the lines on me. Delivered straight to my 8-year-old boy. I staggered into the kitchen, the letter shaking in my grip. When Jonah came out of the bathroom, hair damp, pajamas too big for him, he saw my face. "Mom, what's wrong?" I knelt, trying to steady my voice. "Jonah, did you read this?" He looked at the paper, then looked away. His eyes shimmered. "I didn't mean to. It was in my folder. I thought it was homework." His little voice cracked, and I swear something inside me broke. He whispered, "Is it true? Did I do something wrong? Is that why they don't like us?" "No!" My voice was firm, shaking with rage. I pulled him close, clutching him like I could shield him from the poison of those words. "Jonah, you are good. You are loved. None of this is your fault." He nodded, but his small shoulders sagged in a way I'd never seen before. Childhood sagged out of him in that moment, like someone stole it when I wasn't looking. That night, after Jonah fell asleep with tears drying on his cheeks, I sat in the dark kitchen staring at that letter. My mother, his grandmother, had crossed a line so sharp it might as well have been a blade. It wasn't just cruelty toward me anymore. It was an attack on my son. By morning, I was a storm. I called her. She answered on the third ring, as if she knew exactly why I was calling. "What the hell is wrong with you?" My voice was low, dangerous. "Excuse me?" she said, feigning innocence. "You wrote to Jonah. You put your poison in his backpack. He cried himself to sleep last night because of you." For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she said, cool as ice, "Children should know the truth sooner rather than later." "The truth?" I spat. "That his grandmother thinks he's unworthy? That his mother's divorce is a stain he has to carry?" Her sigh was deliberate, practiced. "Claire, stop dramatizing. If Jonah learns early that actions have consequences, maybe he won't repeat your mistakes." I nearly dropped the phone. "You're punishing him because you hate me." She didn't deny it. She just said, "Some lessons hurt. You'll thank me one day." That was it. That was the moment the ground gave out beneath me. Because this wasn't just coldness, it wasn't just absence. This was a cruel weaponized. My son was being targeted, gaslit by the very people who should have protected him. I hung up before I said something that would burn the line down. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. The rest of the day, I went through motions like a ghost. Dropped Jonah at school, clocked into my shift, nodded at coworkers without hearing a word. Inside, though, something new was taking shape, a sharp, focused rage. That night, Jonah crawled into my bed. He whispered, "Mom, are we ever gonna have a real family?" I held him tight. My throat ached, but I managed. "We already do, baby." "It's you and me." He drifted off, small hand gripping mine. But I lay awake, eyes burning in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Because I knew something now with terrifying clarity. I couldn't let them do this again. Not to Jonah. Not to me. And then, 2 days later, the betrayal deepened. My mother showed up at Jonah's school. Without telling me. Without permission, I found out because Jonah's teacher called me. My shift had just ended. I was walking out of the hospital parking lot, the cold night air burning against my scrubs. My phone buzzed. "Ms. Dawson?" The teacher's voice was tight. "We had a situation today. Your mother came to school. She said she was there to pick Jonah up early." My blood froze. "What?" "She wasn't on the approved list, so we didn't release him. But she caused a bit of a scene in the office. She kept insisting she had the right. Jonah was upset. He thought he was in trouble. My knees nearly gave out. I'm so sorry. I'll handle it." When I got home, Jonah was sitting on the couch with his backpack still on, eyes wide, cheeks blotchy from crying. He looked smaller than he ever had. "She said she wanted to take me for ice cream," he whispered. But the lady in the office said no. "Did I do something bad?" I knelt in front of him, my heart tearing in two. "No, baby. You did nothing wrong. Grandma crossed a line." His voice cracked. Why does she hate us? I wanted to tell him she didn't, but I couldn't lie anymore. Not when he had read her words with his own eyes. Instead, I held him and whispered, She doesn't get to decide our worth. Do you hear me? She doesn't. But even as I said it, the walls of our quiet little house felt thinner, weaker, like her poison had seeped into every corner. That night, after Jonah finally fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine I didn't finish. The letter is to me. The letter to Jonah. The scene at school. It all played in my head like a film reel I couldn't stop. Every word of hers. Every calculated cut. Shame on this family. Embarrass everyone? He'll understand when he's older. I stared at the fridge where Jonah's drawings hung crooked on magnets. A lopsided dinosaur. A stick figure of the two of us holding hands. Bright colors. Hope. And then the contrast. My mother's words, black and sharp, tearing at that hope like claws. That was when I cracked. I put my head down on the table and sobbed. Not the quiet tears I usually swallowed, but deep, raw sobs that shook through me like an earthquake. For once, I didn't try to hide them. For once, I let the grief roll out. Grief for the family I'd never had. Grief for the childhood Jonah deserved. Grief for the illusions I'd still been clinging to. I cried until my chest ached, until I couldn't breathe, until my face was raw and wet. And then, in the quiet that followed, something shifted. Beneath the wreckage, beneath the exhaustion, a spark lit. Small, but steady. Because grief only lasts so long before something harder grows out of it. Rage. Not the kind that flares hot and burns out, but the kind that simmers low, controlled, waiting for the right moment. I sat up, wiped my face, and whispered into the dark kitchen, Enough. Enough of her cruelty. Enough of her control. Enough of letting Jonah be collateral in her endless performance of power. I didn't know yet how I would fight back. But I knew I would. I would gather proof, gather strength, gather every scrap of resolve I had left. She thought she could shame me into silence. She thought she could break me by breaking my son, but she had just handed me the one weapon she didn't expect: determination. I looked at Jonah sleeping on the couch, his hand curled around his stuffed dinosaur, his chest rising and falling in peace he hadn't felt all week, and I made him a promise. Right there in the silence of our little home. They will never hurt you again. Not like this. Not ever. My hands were still trembling, but not from fear anymore. From focus, because the next time my mother came near us, it wouldn't be on her terms. It would be on mine, and I already knew the first step. I told myself the first thing I needed was facts. Not fury. Facts, proof, paper trail, witnesses. The kind of quiet, small things that, when stacked together, make a case you can't sneeze away with a polished smile. I started with the obvious, my phone. I pulled up every text, every missed call, every group chat message, screenshots, dates, times. Her messages were neat, clinical, busy, complicated. Maybe next time. I saved them. I labeled them with the dates. My thumb hovered over the screenshot icon more times than I care to admit. Each tap felt like stitching a seam. Next, I turned to school records. I made an excuse, volunteer hours for extra credit, and signed up for the next parents' meeting. I watched my mother from the back of the room the way a detective watches a suspect. Calm, precise, her face a practiced mask. She arrived in a navy coat and pearls, carried herself like she owned the room. She talked with other parents in a voice that dripped sympathy, and when she passed me, she offered a small, tight smile. I nodded. Inside, I cataloged everything. Claire, whispered Mrs. Finch, the school secretary, one day when I'd stopped by unannounced. You're doing great for Jonah. Her eyes darted to the bulletin board where volunteers signed up. If you ever need anything, rides, help with projects, call me. She pressed my hand and squeezed. Real kindness, not the performative kind. I wrote her name down. I started visiting places I never thought I'd need. the county clerk's office, the small, fluorescent-lit legal aid center downtown, a public records kiosk where you can pull up property transfers and phone logs. Paper binds a story together. I pulled deeds, looked up recent checks, and scanned for anything that suggested my mother had more to hide than her sharp words. I found nothing dramatic at first. Just neat lines, signatures, and a steady hand. But even a blank sheet is a thing when you're looking for patterns. I also found allies where I hadn't expected them. A neighbor, an older man named Tom who walks his dachshund at dawn, saw my mother pull into our street one afternoon. "She's been asking about you," he told me casually. Said something about setting things right, seemed off. I wrote down his exact words. Details matter. At the hospital, I leaned on a coworker named Maya. We'd shared smoke breaks and bad cafeteria coffee for years. She listened without judgment. "This isn't normal," she said one night, voice low. "You have every right to protect your son." She offered something else. A contact. Her cousin, a paralegal who'd helped with family disputes before. I hesitated, then took it. I was learning to accept help, to stop pretending I had to do this alone. I kept my search quiet. Revenge isn't drama. It's patience. So I watched. I recorded. I took photos of cars in the driveway when my mother claimed to be running errands, of unannounced visits to Jonah's school, and of social media posts that contradicted her texts. Each image felt like a small victory, like a stitch in a net I was slowly weaving. There were days I wanted to explode, to drive to her house at midnight and shove the letters back into her hands. But that's what she wanted. A scene, so I breathed. I made lists. I mapped out her patterns, the times she was busy, the events she attended where she posted family photos later that same afternoon. The map began to look deliberate. One afternoon, I drove by her neighborhood without stopping. I sat in my car and watched her come out onto the porch, greeting someone with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I took a photo from across the street. My hands were steady. This felt less like waiting and more like a strategy. Then I found something I hadn't expected. Jonah's teacher, Ms. Parker, pulled me aside after school one day. She looked nervous, like someone who had been holding a secret for too long. "I saw your mother on camera the week before Jonah's party," she said quietly. She was on the school grounds around dismissal. We didn't realize at the time. She'd slip in through the faculty gate when the janitor was late. Her voice dropped. "I pulled the security footage. It's not good." Her fingers tapped her phone. "I can show you, but you have to promise not to confront her alone. It got ugly last time. My heart did a stupid flip." "You have the footage?" My voice sounded small. She nodded. "I didn't want to get involved, but when I saw that letter in his backpack..." She swallowed. "I thought you should know." She handed me her card. "Come by tomorrow after school." "I'll pull it." That night I didn't sleep. My mind raced with what that footage might show. Did she lurk? Did she follow? Did she plant the letter herself? The possibilities multiplied until every shadow seemed suspicious. I kept building. I printed bank statements when a cashier mentioned a check she'd written at a boutique. No signature, but a pattern of purchases I hadn't known about. I became methodical. I labeled everything: date, time, source. I bought a small locked box and put all the printed copies inside. I called the paralegal and told her the bare bones: harassment, targeting my child, and reputation damage. She said one sentence that crystallized things. "If you want them to take this seriously, you build the paper trail." So I did. I started leaving subtle traps, small, legal ones. I emailed the school to update Jonah's emergency contacts, making sure no one could collect him without my explicit okay. I changed passwords. I changed voicemail greetings to reflect that any future contact from my mother should be in writing. I saved every call. I set up a new email address for anything related to this. Proof my name. Silly, practical, clinical. It felt good to name it. And then I planned the bait. It wasn't vicious. It was precise. I created a fake invite, not a real one, an email thread I could control. I sent it to a few people I knew my mother watched. Relatives, certain neighbors, and people who always liked her posts. The invite said there would be a family-only get-together at a nearby venue. Ambiguous, exclusive. I aimed to see who would bite, to watch, to record. I told myself it was just reconnaissance. But when the responses started coming in, casual acceptance, quick RSVPs, little emojis of approval, I felt the net tighten. I printed the replies. I saved the timestamps. Each click felt like a footstep on a path I'd already mapped. Finally, the trap needed one more thing: a public setting where actions would have consequences. A place with witnesses. A place where she couldn't hide behind charm and pearls. I booked a small community hall under a different name. I arranged for a friend to check in guests. I told Ms. Parker about the date and time. She agreed to be there as a quiet witness. I told Maya to keep her calendar open. I lined up people I trusted, people who understood that this wasn't about drama. It was about setting the record straight. The night before the event, before I planned for any of it to happen, I sat at my kitchen table, the locked box of documents beside me, and breathed. My hands were steady. My voice, when I whispered to Jonah in his sleep, was calm. "We're going to be okay," I told him. "I promise. I arranged the evidence. I double-checked the security footage drop-off with Ms. Parker. I rehearsed what I would say. Short sentences. Facts, not fury. Calm, not chaos. Because proof speaks louder than my tears ever could." And then I hit send on the last RSVP I'd needed. Now the trap was set. I went to bed with a hard knot of resolve in my chest and a single, terrible certainty. Once this started, there would be no turning back. The night of the family-only gathering, my stomach churned like I was preparing for surgery. I wasn't sure if I'd eat, speak, or collapse. But I knew one thing. I wasn't the same woman who cried into a half-empty birthday cake a month ago. I arrived early at the community hall. The place was simple. Wooden floors, a faint smell of varnish, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A banner still hung from a church youth event, faded letters spelling, "Together we rise." I almost laughed at the irony. Maya showed up first, holding 2 coffees. She hugged me tighter than I expected. "You've got this," she whispered. "Just remember, you're not alone." Miss Parker came next, carrying a small laptop bag. Her face looked serious, professional. "Footage is here," she said quietly. "If you want, I'll cue it up when the time feels right." My chest tightened. "Thank you," I whispered. My voice shook but steadied on the last word. One by one, the RSVPs trickled in. Cousins, uncles, distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. All smiles and casual greetings. Some of them hugged me awkwardly, pretending they hadn't ignored Jonah's birthday. I shook their hands anyway, and then she arrived. My mother stepped into the hall like it were her stage. Pearls, tailored blazer, hair pinned perfectly. Her heels clicked against the wood as if to announce her power. She carried a gift bag, shiny, gold, and loud. She always knew how to perform. "Claire," she said sweetly, her voice sharp around the edges. "This is unexpected, but I'm glad you finally came to your senses." I forced a calm smile. "Thanks for coming, Mom." My tone was flat, deliberate. I gestured to a seat near the front. "You'll want a good view." She smirked, not catching the double edge. When everyone had arrived, I stood at the front of the room. My knees trembled, but my voice, surprisingly, did not. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I wanted to clear the air. Some of you know, some of you don't. But my son had a birthday party last month. Not a single one of you showed up. Not one." There was a shuffle of feet. Someone coughed. My mother tilted her head, still smiling politely. I raised my phone and held up the screenshots. I sent reminders. I sent directions. You all replied? I clicked through images on a small projector Maya had set up. Dates, times, my texts, their dismissive replies. The room went still. "That's not fair," an uncle muttered. No, I cut him off, sharper than I meant. "It is fair. It's the truth. You left my son sitting by the window, waiting for people who never came." He cried himself to sleep, holding unopened party favors. "That's fair. My voice shook, but not with weakness, with power. Then Ms. Parker stood. She walked to the front, opened her laptop, and projected the grainy black and white security footage onto the wall. The timestamp blinked. There was my mother, slipping through the faculty gate at Jonah's school. Her posture was stiff, furtive. She carried something under her arm. She paused near the cubbies. She looked around, then tucked an envelope into Jonah's backpack. Gasps erupted in the room. My mother's face tightened, but she didn't move. Ms. Parker paused the footage. "This isn't the first time," she said softly. "I've kept records of her coming on campus without permission." I turned back to the room. "That letter you all heard about? The one who told me I was a disgrace? That Jonah didn't deserve family?" She planted it. In her own grandson's bag. The silence was suffocating. My mother stood slowly. Her smile cracked into something brittle. "That's absurd," she said coldly. Taken out of context. "You're twisting—" "Enough!" I snapped, my voice trembling with rage but firm. "No more twisting. No more lies. I have proof. And if you want to keep pretending I'm the problem, then you'll do it knowing exactly what she's done." For the first time, she faltered. Her hand shook as she adjusted her pearl necklace. Small victory. A cousin leaned toward me, whispering just loud enough for others to hear. "We didn't know." "Claire, we didn't know," I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The meeting didn't end with shouting or reconciliation. It ended with tension thick enough to choke on. People left in small groups, avoiding eye contact. Some murmured apologies to me. Others scurried out quickly, afraid of the mess unraveling. But my mother, she stayed. She lingered at the back of the hall, arms crossed, eyes burning holes in my back. "You think you've won," she hissed as I packed up my papers. I met her stare for the first time without flinching. "No," I said quietly. "I think I've just started." She scoffed, turned on her heel, and left. Her heels echoed like gunshots on the wood. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, the locked box of documents heavier than ever. I thought about Jonah asleep upstairs, safe for now. The trap had worked. The first layer of her mask had cracked, but the bigger battle was still ahead, and I knew, deep in my bones, she wasn't done fighting. The fallout from that night simmered like a pot left on low heat. Family members stopped calling, whispers replaced small talk, and Jonah's name became the silence in every room. But my mother, she didn't retreat. She doubled down. 2 days later, I found another envelope on my porch. This one wasn't handwritten. It was typed, clipped clean, no fingerprints. "You'll regret this, Claire. Don't drag the family name through the mud." I held it in my hands, shaking. She was escalating, but instead of fear, I felt something sharper. Resolve. I called Maya, my coworker and now co-conspirator. "It's time," I said, my voice flat. She didn't ask questions. "Let's make it public." The plan was brutal in its simplicity. No whispers, no denials, no closed doors. I would bring her lies into the open where charm and pearls couldn't save her. The opportunity came faster than I expected. A week later, my cousin sent me a Facebook invite. Mom's hosting a family appreciation dinner. Of course she was. A glossy event to rewrite the narrative, to parade her as the matriarch holding us all together. My hands shook as I typed my RSVP. I'll be there. The night of the dinner, I dressed with care. Not flashy, not meek, clean lines, steady colors, my armor. Jonah stayed with Maya. He didn't need to see what was about to happen. The restaurant was rented out, lights dim, tables dressed with linen and candles. My mother worked the room like a politician, handshakes, air kisses, her laugh ringing too loud. "Claire," she said, arms spread wide as if nothing had happened. "I'm so glad you came." "It means a lot," I smiled, not warm, not cold, controlled. Wouldn't miss it. Dinner passed in a haze of forced conversation and clinking glasses. My stomach twisted with anticipation, but my mind was steady. I waited until dessert, when the room was soft, bellies full, wine glasses nearly empty. I stood. My chair scraped the floor. Heads turned. "I need to say something," I began. My voice carried, clear. Something you all deserve to hear. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small projector. Maya, seated nearby, plugged in the laptop. The wall behind me lit up. Click. The texts. The screenshots. The cold replies that left Jonah alone on his birthday. Click. Photos of my mother at the school, slipping in through the gate. Click. The security footage itself. My mother, caught red-handed, was planting the letter in Jonah's bag. Gasps filled the room. Someone dropped a fork. I turned to face them all. You've been told I'm unstable. A bad mother. That Jonah and I don't belong. But here's the truth. The one person undermining us, humiliating us, is her. I pointed straight at my mother. She stood slowly, her face pale but her voice sharp. This is a performance. She's manipulating you all with, "Enough!" I shouted, louder than I meant. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. You told me I was an embarrassment. You let my son suffer because of your pride. You planted poison in his backpack. And I have every second of it recorded. Maya stood too, holding up a folder. Copies have already been sent to the school board, the PTA, and legal aid. This isn't going away. My mother's mask cracked, her lips pressed thin, her hands clutched the back of her chair. You ungrateful. I cut her off, my voice steady now. You taught me silence was survival. But I've learned something better. Truth is stronger than your lies. The room was frozen. Relatives who once smirked at me now stared at her with wide, horrified eyes. The footage replayed in silence, looping the moment she tucked the letter away. She lunged for the projector. Maya blocked her. A cousin gasped. Someone muttered, "Oh my God, she really did it." And then, the collapse. My mother's voice cracked as she tried to spin it, claiming good intentions, just trying to teach a lesson. But the evidence was relentless. Every excuse made her smaller. Every denial twisted her tighter in her own web. For the first time in my life, I watched her lose control. I looked at my family, my voice calm. You don't have to choose sides. But know this, I will never let her near my son again. Ever. And with that, I packed up the projector, nodded to Maya, and walked out. Behind me, the room erupted into chaos. Shouts, questions. Her raised voice desperately trying to pull back the narrative. But the tide had shifted. The story was no longer hers to tell. That night, driving home, I felt a strange calm. The battle wasn't over. The fallout would be messy. But I had ripped the mask from her face. She could never pretend again. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was breathing air that was truly my own. But deep down, I knew the aftermath was coming. And not everyone survives the fallout. When I woke the next morning, the air felt different. Quiet. Not the soft quiet of peace, but the brittle quiet of things breaking apart. My phone was lit up with messages. Missed calls, voicemails, texts from cousins, even a couple from my aunt who'd always been Switzerland in family feuds. Claire, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Your mom is telling everyone you faked that video. Please call me. I need to understand what happened. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I walked into Jonah's room. He was still asleep, his small hand clutching the stuffed dinosaur he never let go of. I brushed his hair back, kissed his forehead. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders didn't feel like they were carrying bricks. By noon, the fallout had begun. Ms. Parker texted me a single line. The school board saw the footage. She's banned from campus. I stared at the screen, relief washing through me so strong it made my knees weak. One layer of safety is locked into place, then another ping, Maya again. My cousin filed the paperwork. If she tries to harass you again, you've got grounds for a restraining order. It was working. The net I'd woven knot by knot was holding, but it wasn't all victory. The storm had a way of circling back. By evening, I saw my mother's Facebook post. A long, flowery message about being misrepresented, about a daughter's bitterness twisting a mother's love into cruelty. Comments poured in, some supportive, some skeptical. She still had her defenders. People who only saw pearls and poise, not the woman in the footage slipping into a school like a thief. I closed the app. I couldn't fight her in every corner of the internet. That wasn't the battlefield that mattered. The real battlefield was the family. 2 days later, my aunt called. Her voice was sharp, trembling. "She's furious, Claire. She's saying you've ruined the family name. But," she lowered her voice, "others are whispering about things she's done before. Things we never looked at too closely." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Like what?" A long silence. Then, "Do you remember when your cousin Sarah stopped talking to her parents for a year? She told me last night it was because of your mother. She meddled, drove a wedge. We thought it was just family drama, but now the words hung between us like smoke. She's been doing this for years," I whispered. Slowly, the cracks widened. Cousins stopped answering her calls. Neighbors side-eyed her when she walked her dog. The PTA quietly removed her from a committee she'd chaired for a decade. It wasn't my speech or even the footage that undid her. It was the spotlight. Once people saw behind the curtain, they couldn't unsee it, but she didn't go quietly. One night, around midnight, my doorbell rang. The chime echoed through the house like a warning. I froze. Peered through the peephole. It was her. She stood there, no pearls this time, hair disheveled, clutching something in her hand. "A photo frame! Claire!" she hissed through the door. "Let me in." "We need to talk." My pulse hammered. I pressed the deadbolt tighter. "Go home, Mom. You think you've won?" Her voice cracked, not polished now. Raw, jagged. "You're nothing without me." "You'll see," I swallowed hard. My voice was steady when I answered. "I was nothing with you." "I'm something now." She slammed the frame against the door. Glass shattered. I jumped back, heart racing. Her footsteps pounded away into the night. I didn't call after her. I didn't open the door. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed the number Maya's cousin had given me. "File the order," I said. My voice was flat, steel. The next morning, a sheriff's deputy handed me a copy of the restraining order. My mother's name, in black ink, officially barred her from my house, Jonah's school, and anywhere near us. It felt like armor. Paper thin, maybe, but armor all the same. The weeks that followed were messy. Some family members drifted away entirely. Others apologized, quietly, almost ashamed. A few tried to patch things up. But I kept my distance. I didn't need their pity. I needed my son to be safe, and every night, when I tucked him in, I reminded myself I had chosen truth over silence. But here's the strange part. When the dust began to settle, I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. I felt free. For the first time, her voice wasn't in my ear. Her shadow wasn't at my back, and that freedom, quiet, steady, unshakable, was the real revenge. But one question lingered. If she ever reached out again, years from now, would I be strong enough to face her without fear? It's been 6 months since the night my mother shattered that photo frame against my door. 6 months since I finally stopped pretending silence was safer than truth. Life isn't perfect now, but it's ours. Jonah turned 9 last week. We threw him a birthday party at the park. Balloons tied to picnic tables, cupcakes instead of a store-bought cake, kids running wild until dusk. This time, the people who showed up weren't family bound by blood. They were friends, neighbors, co-workers, people who chose us. And Jonah? He laughed so hard his cheeks hurt. He fell asleep that night with frosting still smudged on his chin. I stood under the fairy lights and watched him open presents. My chest felt full but not heavy. For once, joy wasn't followed by the sharp sting of disappointment. Because here's what I've learned. Family isn't defined by titles or last names. It's defined by who shows up, who protects you when you're weak, who claps for you when you're strong. And my mother? She doesn't get to define us anymore. The restraining order still stands. She's tried to reach out. Emails, letters slipped into my mailbox, even a voicemail through a blocked number, but I don't answer. I don't need to. I've reclaimed my power, and no performance, no pearl necklace, no public dinner can take that back. I don't forgive her. Maybe I never will. But I don't fear her anymore either. And that's freedom. That's the kind of revenge she'll never understand. Because the truth? The sweetest revenge isn't her downfall. It's my son's laughter echoing through the air, untouched by her poison. It's the peace in my home. It's the strength in my own voice. I finally know who I am without her shadow. And I'm enough. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. It means more than you know. Tell me, would you forgive betrayal like this, or would you walk away forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and where you're watching from. The end.